I had always been in the background, doing my job quietly, never seeking the spotlight. While others were getting promoted, gaining recognition, and stepping up to new roles, I stayed put. My work was solid, no doubt about it. But it felt like I was invisible, like the longer I stayed in the same role, the more I faded into the background. It was frustrating. Every time someone else took credit for a project I had worked on, or when the credit for success was handed to someone else in a meeting, I bit my tongue and kept my head down. I was the reliable one, the one who got things done, but I never stood out. It wasn't that I wasn't good at my job. I was. But it always felt like there was a barrier between me and the opportunities I deserved. I remember sitting at my desk late one night, the office nearly empty except for a few of us still working. I had just finished a report I knew would be important for the team's progress, but as usual, no one seemed to notice. There were no thank yous, no acknowledgement of the extra hours I'd put in. Just another task completed without fanfare. I was tired, but I knew this was the reality. I had learned to accept it. Then came a turning point. The company was in crisis mode. A major client was threatening to pull their business due to some poor decisions made by the upper management. The team was scrambling, trying to find a solution, but no one had the right answers. The pressure was mounting, and the hours were growing longer. That's when I realized something. I had been quietly gathering information, analyzing the situation from every angle. While everyone was focused on solving the immediate issues, I had already identified the root cause and a way to turn things around. But no one had asked me for my input. No one had even considered that I might have a solution. I had the answer, but there was one problem. I was the invisible one. How could I possibly make them listen? How could I speak up in a room full of people who hadn't even noticed the work I had been doing? But then it hit me. I wasn't going to wait for someone to ask me. I wasn't going to sit back and let the opportunity pass by. I had been waiting for too long to be noticed. It was time to make them notice me on my own terms. So I stood up. I walked into the meeting room where the senior team was gathered, all eyes on their laptops or phones. I wasn't the loudest person in the room, nor the most outspoken, but in that moment I made a decision. I was going to speak up. I was going to give them the solution they had been looking for, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. I took a deep breath and said, "I believe I have a plan to fix this, if you're willing to listen." There was a pause. I could feel the room's attention shift toward me. The CEO looked up first, a hint of curiosity on his face. The room fell silent as I laid out my solution, step by step. I explained how we could salvage the client relationship, rebuild trust, and move forward with a renewed sense of confidence. It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't anything spectacular, but it was clear, it was calculated, and it was exactly what they needed to hear. The room stayed quiet for a moment longer, and then the CEO nodded. "That's exactly what we need," he said. "Let's move forward with this plan." And just like that, everything changed. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet, invisible employee. I was the one who had the solution, the one who had stepped up when no one else had the answers. Where are you watching from? And what's your role at work? Have you ever had that moment where you realized you could make a bigger impact if only you spoke up? Tell me in the comments below. I'm Amelia, and this moment wasn't just a breakthrough for the company. It was a breakthrough for me. I had spent so much time thinking that my work should speak for itself, but I realized that sometimes you have to speak for your work. And in doing so, I showed everyone, including myself, that I wasn't invisible anymore. The days after I presented my solution felt surreal. The team rallied behind the plan, and before I knew it, the company was back on track. The client was satisfied, and we had avoided what could have been a major disaster. But as the dust settled, I found myself sitting at my desk, reflecting on everything that had happened. I wasn't used to the attention, even if it was just the quiet acknowledgement of my contribution. I wasn't the kind of person to bask in the spotlight. I'd always been in the background, doing the work, hoping that someone would notice. But now, something had shifted. I had spoken up, and the results spoke for themselves. However, there was a part of me that still felt uneasy. Was this just a one-time thing? Had I only been noticed because the company was in crisis? Or had I finally found my voice? I decided to keep pushing. I couldn't let this momentum slip away. So I kept working, kept doing my best, but this time with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. I started volunteering to lead projects, offering my input in meetings, and taking on more responsibility. I knew that if I wanted to change how I was perceived, I had to keep proving myself. But then another test came. A few weeks later, the company faced another challenge. This time, it wasn't about a client, it was internal. There was a team conflict, and the leadership was struggling to get everyone on the same page. The tension in the office was palpable, and it seemed like the problem would only get worse before it got better. I knew that this was another opportunity. This wasn't a situation I could sit out. I had worked with some of the team members involved in the conflict, and I understood the issue from multiple angles. It was time for me to step up again, but this time, I wasn't going to wait for someone to ask for my opinion. I was going to take charge and offer a solution. So I did something I had never done before. I sent an email to the leadership team outlining a strategy to address the conflict. It was bold, too bold for the old me, but I was no longer the same person. I wasn't afraid to share my thoughts anymore, and this time I was ready for the challenge. The response I got was immediate. Within an hour, I was called into a meeting with the senior leadership team. I sat there, feeling the weight of their eyes on me as I presented my strategy. I could see the surprise on their faces. They weren't used to hearing ideas from someone in my position, but I didn't let the surprise throw me off. I just focused on the solution. As I spoke, I could feel the tension in the room ease. My idea was practical, clear, and exactly what they needed. The leadership team was impressed, and within a few days, the conflict was resolved. Not only that, but I had earned the trust of the senior team, and my contributions were finally being recognized. Where are you watching from today? Are you the quiet one in your office too, or are you the one who speaks up? Let me know in the comments below. The real turning point for me, however, came when my manager asked to speak with me. He called me into his office one afternoon, a serious look on his face. My heart raced. Was I in trouble? But as I sat down across from him, he smiled. "I've been noticing something," he began. "You've really stepped up lately. I know it's not easy, but your contributions have been invaluable. I think you're ready for a bigger role in the company." My heart skipped a beat. Could this really be happening? Just a few weeks ago, I was the invisible one, the quiet employee who no one noticed. And now, my manager was telling me I was ready for more. "Thank you," I said, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I'm ready." It wasn't just the recognition that meant so much to me. It was the fact that I had finally shown myself what I was capable of. I had taken control of my future, and for the first time in my life, I truly felt in charge of my destiny. That conversation with my manager marked the beginning of a new chapter for me. I was no longer just the quiet worker in the corner. I was someone who had the ability to lead, to make an impact, and to rise above the expectations others had placed on me. And I wasn't going to stop here. The months following that pivotal conversation with my manager were a blur of new challenges and unexpected opportunities. I was given a new role, one that came with more responsibility and more visibility. It wasn't an immediate promotion, but it was a step in the right direction. And for the first time in my career, I felt like I was finally being recognized for the value I brought to the table. But as much as I had hoped for this moment, I was faced with a new kind of pressure. It wasn't just about doing my job anymore. It was about proving that I belonged in this new role. And while the excitement of being noticed was still fresh, there was a nagging fear that lingered in the back of my mind. What if I wasn't good enough? What if I failed? I kept those doubts to myself, though. I didn't share them with anyone. Instead, I threw myself into my work. I spent hours brainstorming new ideas, researching ways to improve processes, and learning from every mistake I made. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't afraid of hard work anymore. I had already proven to myself that I was capable of much more than I had ever thought possible. One morning, I received an email from the CEO. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name in the subject line. The message was short and to the point. "We need you to take on a major project. Let's meet to discuss details. I couldn't believe it. A project led by me, with the CEO himself trusting me with such a high-profile task. This was a big deal. I spent the next few hours preparing for the meeting, doing everything I could to make sure I was ready. I knew this project could be the one that defined my career. It wasn't just about completing a task. It was about proving that I could lead, that I could be the person people turn to when things got tough. When the meeting finally happened, the CEO laid out the scope of the project. It was huge, far beyond anything I had ever handled. The stakes were high, and the timeline was tight. But as I listened to him explain the details, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. This was my moment, my chance to prove that I could handle responsibility at a higher level. I took a deep breath and said, "I'll get it done. You can count on me." For the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly on the project. There were moments when I felt overwhelmed, when I doubted my ability to meet the expectations placed on me. But each time that doubt crept in, I remembered how far I had come. I had gone from being the forgotten employee to being the one trusted with a company-changing project. I couldn't let fear stop me now. I worked long hours, just like I used to, but this time it was different. I wasn't working for someone else's approval. I wasn't working just to stay invisible. I was working for myself, to prove that I was capable of far more than anyone had ever believed. And then came the day of the presentation. The final meeting where I would present my work to the CEO and the rest of the leadership team. I spent hours rehearsing, tweaking every detail to make sure everything was perfect. This was it, the moment where I would show everyone, including myself, what I could do. As I stood in front of the team, presenting my work, I could feel the eyes on me. I could feel the weight of the moment, but instead of feeling nervous, I felt confident. I knew I had done everything I could. I knew this was my best work. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. And then the CEO spoke. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "Excellent work, Amelia." I was speechless. In that moment, everything changed. I had done it. I had proven that I was capable of leading, of executing at a level I had never thought possible. The leadership team nodded in agreement, and I could see the respect in their eyes. For the first time in my career, I was being recognized not just for my work, but for my leadership. I had finally become the person I had always dreamed of being. Where are you watching from today? How has your journey been at work? Have you ever faced a challenge that pushed you beyond your limits? Let me know in the comments below. But this wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning. I wasn't going to stop here. The respect I had earned was only the first step. The real challenge was maintaining it, continuing to prove that I could not only do the work, but lead and inspire others to do the same. I had started as the forgotten employee, the one who no one noticed. But now, I was someone who could take on any challenge, someone who had proven to herself that no dream was too big. And with that, I knew the future was mine to shape. The weeks that followed the successful project presentation felt like a dream. My reputation had shifted. No longer was I the quiet worker who stayed in the background. Now I was the go-to person, the one people turned to when they needed results. The company trusted me with more significant projects, and my leadership role was expanding. But with that newfound responsibility came something I hadn't anticipated: the weight of expectation. For the first time in my career, I was being held to a higher standard. I wasn't just delivering work. I was expected to lead teams, inspire others, and make decisions that could affect the company's future. And while I embraced the challenge, there were days when I felt overwhelmed. Could I continue to rise to the occasion? Could I keep up with the pressure? I remember one evening when everything seemed to pile up at once. It was nearing 10 p.m., and I was sitting at my desk, staring at a project plan that didn't make sense. The deadlines were tight, the team was spread thin, and the weight of it all was beginning to feel like more than I could bear. I wanted to walk away, to say it was too much. But as I sat there, exhausted, something inside me clicked. I had been through worse. I had faced challenges that seemed impossible and had always found a way to overcome them. This time wouldn't be any different. I took a deep breath and started to organize my thoughts. I made a list of everything that needed to be done: breaking down the overwhelming project into manageable pieces. I delegated tasks to the team, not because I wanted to do everything myself, but because I had learned that leadership wasn't about doing it all. It was about trusting your team and letting them shine. The next morning, I walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. I had a plan, and I was ready to execute it. The team followed suit. We worked long hours together, collaborating, refining, and improving the project until it was perfect. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but in the end, we delivered. And the pride I felt in that moment wasn't just because of the success, it was because I had learned to lead with confidence. But the real breakthrough came when I received a call from the CEO inviting me to lunch. I was shocked. Lunch with the CEO? It wasn't something I had expected. But when we sat down together, the conversation wasn't about business. It was about me. "We've been watching your progress," the CEO said, smiling. "You've gone from being the quiet worker in the background to someone who takes charge and delivers exceptional results. I want to let you know that we're considering you for a senior leadership role." My heart raced as I listened. A senior leadership role? I had worked my whole life for a chance like this, but I never imagined it would come so soon. And yet, as I thought about it, I realized that I was ready. I had worked hard, pushed myself, and proven that I could handle the responsibility. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady despite the excitement bubbling inside me. "I want to continue making an impact. I'm ready to take on more." From that moment on, everything changed again. I was no longer just part of the team, I was leading it. The senior leadership role wasn't just a title, it was a symbol of everything I had accomplished. But it wasn't just about the recognition. It was about knowing that I had earned it. Where are you watching from today? Have you ever had a moment where you realized just how far you've come? Let me know in the comments below. As I walked back to my desk that day, I couldn't help but smile. I had gone from being the forgotten employee, the one who worked quietly in the background, to someone who was now leading a team. But the most important lesson I had learned through this entire journey was that no one else could define my worth. I had the power to change my own story. And now, I was writing it exactly the way I wanted. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But one thing was for sure, I was no longer invisible. I was seen, respected, and capable of achieving everything I had once dreamed of. And with that, the future was wide open.